Well, we have some stunning news about the next person that Donald Trump is setting his sights on. But I think it's important that when we come across these stories, we not experience them as an individual story, but within a context. We do, as someone once said, live within the context of what came before us and what is ahead of us, and no coconut trees. So before getting into the big news, let me just contextualize this with a few headlines. Federal judge calls Trump's order targeting prominent law firm a shocking abuse of power. So law firms that represent people, and you should keep this up, Jaden, that Trump doesn't like, he has targeted. Then Associated Press has been barred from the Oval Office for not using the preferred lingo about the Gulf of Mexico, or as Trump likes to call it, the Gulf of America, something that petty. They're now being targeted for. President Trump is going after CBS and 60 Minutes, saying they should pay a big price, the lawsuit, FCC harassing them, etc. Then one of the most egregious examples, people who have there's zero reason to believe that they've committed crimes, have the DOJ directed by Trump on video. He signed that order, getting the DOJ to look into Miles Taylor and Christopher Krebs, who were former administration officials who ended up speaking out against him or refuting his election lies. And for that reason alone, and they've been really struggling to defend this particular step because of how black and white it is, he's getting the DOJ to harass them. The Daily Beast reminds us neither Taylor nor Krebs may be names top of mind today, but they apparently retain a prominent place in Trump's psyche. As the director of cybersecurity and infrastructure agency, Krebs discredited theories put forward by Trump that the 2020 election had been stolen after his tenure as chief of staff to the director of Homeland Security ended. Meanwhile, Taylor wrote a memoir criticizing Trump's handling of classified information, which was built upon revelations he shared in a bombshell anonymous op-ed describing many senior Trump officials as being part of resistant efforts to limit Trump's impulses. So that's the reason, because Miles Taylor wrote an op-ed and then a book that was critical of Trump, and Christopher Krebs debunked Trump's, as a cybersecurity official within the Trump administration, Trump's election lies. They're now being targeted. You remember Iowa pollster Ann Seltzer is asking a federal court to throw out Trump's lawsuit because Trump is going after her for publishing a poll he didn't like. So all of that's important because as an individual story, this next one, I think without that context, can be misunderstood. But the New Republic says Trump begins his revenge on New York nemesis who beat him in court. New York Attorney General Letitia James, of course, brought the civil case against Trump and was very clear in her opposition to him and won that fraud case against him regarding his business fraud. And it's very interesting what she is now having a criminal referral over. You'll see eerily similar allegations. Donald Trump's going after New York Attorney General Letitia James. Trump's federal housing director, William Polt, issued a criminal referral for James to the Department of Justice, alleging she committed mortgage fraud. The Federal Housing Finance Agency director claims James falsified bank documents and property records to acquire government-backed assistance and loans and more favorable loan terms. That's really similar to what Trump did. Very fascinating. James won a $464 million civil fraud suit against Trump, his companies, and business associates last year over his business practices, a case the president is still appealing. He has carried a vendetta against James ever since, most recently attacking his enemy in a Truth Social post Monday. James's office responded by calling Trump a bully. So as an individual story, we haven't seen the evidence that they're alleging of the fraud that she's supposedly engaged in, and charges haven't yet been brought. But sometimes Democratic politicians, even enemies of Trump, could end up committing illegal activity, obviously. And in those cases, they should be held accountable. But you can't miss that we know why they're looking into her business. We know that. And what's interesting is, let's say that genuine illegality came to surface here. I saw one thing, again, this is so similar to what Trump has to pay a lot of money because of. So that's another sort of interesting coincidence. But a building is this many floors or this many units, when it's actually that, was also part of the allegations against Letitia James. And And so it could really come to surface. We'll see day in court, all those good things, what actually ends up being proven, that she did something wrong. And if that's the case, then I assume MAGA will say, like how Trump was proven to have done things wrong, but they said it's still not acceptable that people prosecuted him or pursued these cases against him because there was a political motivation. Now, there's disputes over whether or not there was a political motivation, but they said that the fact that there could be one, regardless of if you could prove an illegal act on the part of Trump, which you could, and they did, means that these cases weren't justified. So will they take the same tone when an obvious political motivation here is at play? No. Now, of course, we don't think Trump should be engaging in the string of retribution efforts that he has. And also, if you found wrongdoing, and then whatever the justified accountability should come of it. But Letitia James, during a speech, sort of generally addressed this here.
My mission is clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University that overturned legal segregation in this country. I've been taught in those classrooms where Thurgood Marshall once taught. I'm not afraid of no president. Donald Trump, we're ready for you. We're coming for you. We're standing up for you. We're fighting on. We're not going down silent. Victory, my friends, is clear. It's now. And I'm not waiting 4 years. I'm waiting 2 until a speaker by the name of Hakeem Jeffries comes to bring us some rest. Come on, ladies. It's up to us. We saved this democracy before. We'll save it now. Let's go.
Wow. So there is that. Now, another legal feud that's going on is finally someone's bringing a case against Trump on tariffs. Political reports, California's first state to sue Trump on tariffs. It's Governor Gavin Newsom's most direct move against Trump since the president retook office. So what's the legal argument here? Well, Trump right now is using emergency powers to impose the tariffs that he's imposing, and do so without the approval of Congress. In the case of emergency, he has that power. But what's the emergency? They just say, oh, our national security is threatened by unfair trade or something. So California is now bringing this case saying, no, you're destroying our economy, or seeking to do so, really. And we don't believe you have the legal authority to do so. Gavin Newsom posted this on that note.
Today, I announced a lawsuit on behalf of the state of California suing the Trump administration. California is the largest manufacturing state in our union, one of the largest trading partners around the globe. No state will be impacted more than the state of California as it relates to the unilateral authority that's being asserted by the Trump administration to impose the largest tax increase in modern American history.
Yeah, a couple reminders before going further to another Newsom clip. Please do click the subscribe button, and that's free, and that's on YouTube. And then if you want to go a step further and get extra content like the bonus show, you can click the join button on YouTube below. And if you don't see the join button, some people don't see that, then in the description we have it linked. And on the bonus show, we're going to talk about this massive tax hike. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, today spoke pretty directly about the economic consequences of that, and we'll be discussing that on the bonus show. Then Newsom here made a similar case during an interview, or no, this is during his podcast.
California is the biggest manufacturing state in America. People forget that. California is number one in two-way trade, number one in direct foreign investment, and number one manufacturing state in America. 40% of the goods movements in this country come through 2 ports of entry in California, about 50% of that from China itself. No state has more to lose, more to gain as it relates to ag, as it relates to all of these industries and tech, as you noted, AI, et cetera. So that's, by the way, why we just filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. And we did it on, I think, very sound grounds. And it's an interesting lawsuit for many different reasons, but we've got to push back much more aggressively on the consequences of this.
Yeah, and we'll see. My guess would be it's going to be tough to get these tariffs overturned. And our job will mostly be to explain to people the consequences of the tariffs and who's to blame for them, so that then as quickly as possible, we can get a Congress in place that will take back the authority that Republicans ceded to Trump. The New York Times reports under GOP, Congress cedes power to Trump, eroding its influence on numerous things. And one of them is their ability to rescind Trump's tariffs. Quickly surrendered their chamber's ability to undo Mr. Trump's tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China in an effort to shield their members from having to take a politically tough vote. Normally, they would vote to approve or rescind this, but instead they're saying, we don't want to have to be on the record because this will cause absolute destruction politically, voting for affirmatively. But this is them voting for affirmatively Trump's tariffs, and so we need to make sure that people remember that. But if politically, electorally, we can see Democrats take control of the House and Senate, then they could actually much more clearly rescind these sorts of policies than a legal case that likely eventually will be appealed to the Supreme Court, and we don't have much hope there. But the chaos of Trump's tariffs is causing some Republicans to slowly change their tone as they realize the moment that we're in now is when all of the campaign ads are going to be sourced from, right? Clips of people saying, I love Trump's tariffs, as people a year from now are going into the midterms and are upset about their economic pain because of them. So some Republicans are trying to a little bit distance themselves. John Kennedy, the Republican senator, he's very folksy, he wants you to know. He had this to say.
Here's what I see. I see a lot of uncertainty. And I think to some extent, it's intentional. If you listen to the president's aides weekend before last and then listen to them this weekend, you don't have to be Einstein's cousin to figure out they were saying things that were inconsistent. Now,
you don't have to be Einstein's brother.
Now that raises one or two possibilities to me. Either it's intentional, or these folks aren't competent to manage a food truck. Now, I know them; they're intelligent people, whether you agree with them or not. So I think the administration, for whatever reason, is obfuscating a little bit. Maybe it's part of the president's negotiating strategy. I just don't know. I do know this. Tariffs are important, but so are high prices. The trade balance is abstract. The price of eggs is concrete, and we need to be spending a lot of time on reconciliation, redesigning the tax code, deregulating the economy, reducing spending to get prices down. That's it. Is it least as important as tariffs, in my opinion.
Well, let's talk about
all right, so not a profile in courage or anything, but not the most full-throated support of Trump on the tariffs. And again, we'll follow this as it progresses. I asked in a segment at some point, who knows, so many segments, when do you think some Republicans will kind of publicly distance themselves, at least from this policy? And you're seeing the beginnings of it, because it's not even the way that Republicans were able to connect or Biden to inflation just because he was president, but then made a really poor case. But then a lot of people bought the poor case that it wasn't the underlying pandemic conditions that were actually being handled pretty well, but then there was painful inflation because of the pandemic conditions. But even that, there's not that direct of a through line like there's going to be with the tariffs to prices, right? The price increases because of tariffs and the economic chaos because of tariffs is such a direct thing that it's going to be impossible, if they were supportive of Trump, for them then to fake care about a problem that people inevitably are going to be voting based off of being price increases and, again, that economic uncertainty. And then just to sort of round out some miscellaneous but important items here, RFK Jr., our Health and Human Services Secretary, he held a pretty wacky press conference where he kind of went after the media, saying that people are engaging in the myth of epidemic denial, talking about autism. And then he was discussing autism. And you might remember that he made this proclamation that by September, we're going to have the reason that autism rates are increasing, which I find to be a very bizarre proclamation, because what if you don't get the answer by then, or you don't like the answer that you do get, which seems to be a part of what we're already dealing with him. Autism rates, the New York Times provides some background here, among children have increased nearly fivefold, and I'll show you these clips, since 2000, when the CDC first began collecting data on the condition's incidence in children. The CDC's new report attributed some of the increase in autism's prevalence to more screening for the condition. And researchers have pointed to several other factors, including greater awareness of what autism looks like, more access to services, more parents having children later in life, and broader definitions of the disorder. So that's what he was taking issue with and saying that that's a myth, and that's just a ridiculous statement for him to make that it's a myth. It's not that there couldn't be other factors too. Fine, and let's identify those. Number one, though, don't lie about the truth of that, which is the widening of the screening and just more awareness. And number two, don't do the thing where you ask these vague questions that you're really wanting people to answer in their head, which a lot of people, whether he's intending to do this or not, when he asks these really general vague questions and doesn't specify what he means, as the Marjories of the world are doing as well, the response in the minds of a lot of people is, oh, they're talking about vaccines. Vaccines are the reason that autism rates are spiking, which we know. And they'll constantly play dumb with this and pretend like we haven't thoroughly researched this. We know that's not the case, because that is something that's been researched. And it's totally fine to ask the question. We asked it a bunch of times, and then we researched it, and then we got an answer. And all of you really don't want to accept that for some reason, that no, vaccines aren't causing rising autism rates. And by constantly suggesting that, flying in the face of the research, you're setting up a really dangerous set of circumstances for people and causing decreasing vaccination rates in certain communities, which can be disastrous. Mr. Kennedy vowed that under his leadership, the health department would focus on looking into certain substances like mold and food additives and parental obesity to try to reverse rising autism rates in children. These are kids who, and this is a quote of his we'll look at in a second, scientists have not ruled out the possibility that both genes and environmental factors could influence whether a child develops autism. Still, there's no evidence to suggest that autism can be avoided, and researchers immediately criticize the suggestion. And this kind of gets to something we come back to a lot, which is understanding when evidence has been brought forward and when evidence hasn't. And by specifying that we just don't have evidence for something doesn't mean you can't research it and try to understand it, and maybe evidence will come forward. But a basic part of science, and this is the case with a lot of RFK Jr.'s issues, he doesn't seem to really contend with basic tenets of how you conduct this sort of research. And so he shouldn't be ignoring the changes in how we diagnose and our understanding and awareness and screening. And then also as researchers are constantly looking into and trying to understand and are open about discussing, there are other factors. There could be other factors as well: maternal health, prenatal factors. You heard mentioned there, maternal age, etc. But this attack mentality that he had in this press conference was very bizarre and drew condemnation. First, though, this clip is weird. A lot of people with autism responded to it with, what?
Sir. This is an individual tragedy as well. Autism destroys families. More importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children. These are children who should not be suffering like this. These are kids who, many of them were fully functional and regressed because of some environmental exposure into autism when they're 2 years old. And these are kids who will never pay taxes. They'll never hold a job. They'll never play baseball. They'll never write a poem. They'll never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. And we have to recognize we are doing this to our children.
So again, I don't know if he's talking about a specific subset of people, but it didn't seem that he specified that, because obviously, there's a range of outcomes for folks, but he seemed sometimes to ignore all the people who are thriving and have autism many of you are watching. Hello. And so on so many of these things, it's sort of, yeah, okay. With this one, it's him ignoring the range. And then on other things, it's him outright denying one of the major factors to the thing that he says he's looking into, like rising rates. That's here.
Came back with a definitive answer. The epidemic is real. Only a very, very small portion of it can be changed to can be charged to better recognition or better diagnostic criteria. I want to say a couple of other things. There are many, many other studies that affirm this. And instead of listening to this canard of epidemic denial, all you have to do is start reading a little science, because
it's just bizarre. That's what we're doing, RFK. Bobby, that's what we're doing. And yeah, if there does indeed end up being evidence of an environmental factor, let's address that. Great, for sure. But there's just so much missing context and bizarre articulation of his points. And then that attack mentality and a denial of a key part of this, which one of the reasons we warned of him being in this position. Share your thoughts in the comments.